Hey guys, some slightly different content today because over the past couple of months I've had people messaging me asking me if I can make a video on some A-level study tips, which of course I can. Here I am, I live to please. Sorry about the slight delay. I wanted to make sure I'd actually passed my exams before I was dishing out information, but thankfully I did. I took maths, further maths, physics, computer science, and I did an EPQ on prime conjectures, and I was lucky enough to receive 5 A stars, so hopefully there's somewhat proof in the pudding. Obviously there are so many things that you can do that are going to help the way that you're studying, but these are some of the things that I think are going to make the biggest change. Obviously they're slightly maths focused based off the subjects that I took, but everyone's welcome here. There's something for everyone. Hopefully I can help you all. Okay, I mean, we can quickly run through the obvious ones, like you want to make sure that you're sleeping 8 hours a night, eating 3 meals a day, exercising regularly. You need to make sure that you've got a clean study space, that you bring the right stuff to sixth form. The most important one is that your phone is your worst enemy and it should be off whenever possible. You know, these things are quite annoying because you hear them all the time, but also they're true. You know, these are the fundamentals in terms of how well you're going to function as a person, and if you're not nourishing your brain in the right way, then it doesn't matter how well you studied your flashcards. If you haven't slept in 3 days, your body just simply isn't going to work. And so I'd say that you need to make sure that you've got these core things under control, because changing one of these is definitely the way that you're going to see the biggest result in the shortest amount of time. My first tip would be that past papers are your absolute best friend. They are the best resource out there. Lots of people know this, but unfortunately there's not that many of them because of a syllabus change a couple of years ago. And this means that for every past paper you can get your hands on, you want to make sure that you're using it to its absolute fullest potential, which is not doing it once and then filing it away. You know, you should be doing these past papers over and over and over again. I would say that I did the same paper probably every third or fourth month, and I think it's a common misconception that people think that they're going to remember what was on the paper, but you really aren't, at least not from my experience and the experience of people around me. You know, even if you do take a paper again, you get 100%, that's great, you've got an excellent memory, but you probably won't. Even though your exam is going to be exam board specific, there's nothing stopping you from pulling questions or papers from other exam boards. You know, there's AQA, EdExcel, OCR, WJC, there's loads of different papers out there, and what's taught in physics A-level is very similar across them all. And so if you're looking for some extra questions or papers to do, if you sort of run out of resources, that's definitely a really good place to go. You should definitely be doing your past papers in exam conditions, which doesn't necessarily mean you need to allocate a 3-hour slot and do it all at once, even though that would sort of be ideal. You can break down into hour chunks if that fits into your timetable better, but make sure that when you're doing it, you don't have sort of music or YouTube on in the background, that you're not looking at your textbook. You want to try and emulate that sort of end of A-level exam experience as much as possible, because that's sort of the best measure of how well you grasp what you've learned so far. Final thing I'd say on past papers is that you learn the most from what you get wrong, and so you need to allocate a good amount of time in marking your paper, and you want to make sure that you're doing it properly. You know, don't just gloss over your answer and give yourself a mark based on what you think. Really look through the mark scheme, look through the comments on the side. You can look through the examiner's report, which is a separate document. You know, really make sure that you understand what you did wrong and why. And then what I like to do is when I finish, put a post-it note on the front, check through the paper and look for any sort of big topics or lessons that I didn't perform very well in. For example, if you got 2 out of 13 on electricity in a physics paper, look at it and go, oh yeah, this was on potentiometers, not very strong. Write it down, and then if you've got, you know, spare 15 minutes at the end of the day, you know that you need to go back and look at that topic on potentiometers. My second tip is to establish good relationships with your subject teachers or just generally the staff at your sixth form. It doesn't really matter if you don't like them or you find them annoying. What matters is that when a teacher thinks of you, they think of someone who's polite, who works hard, who is committed to doing well in a subject. And these things are really, really easy to implement every day. You know, put your hand up in class, offer to hand out sheets, say good morning, say thank you, write nice emails, hand your homework in on time. All these little things that sort of show your teacher that you're active in the lesson and that you want to be sort of part of the team. And it won't really matter in year 12, but what's going to happen is that at the end of year 13, everyone is going to suddenly realise that there are topics that you've learned over the past 2 years that they don't understand, and they're going to be emailing your teacher asking them to dedicate some time to helping them, and teachers don't have infinite amount of time after school. And so what they're going to do is they're going to prioritise the students that they think deserve to do well, and that's going to be you. Obviously the student that's sort of been present throughout the 2 years, you're going to get most of the teacher's help, and that is one very big step ahead that you can get over everybody else. My third tip is that if you want to learn something now, the best way to do it is to go onto YouTube. I think this is much better than reading your textbook or your notes or a mark scheme, because even though it takes a little bit longer, when you watch a video on YouTube, you're sort of being retaught by a person. You're engaging with somebody, you've got audio, you've got visual, you've got, you know, cute cartoons. That's much more engaging than just reading a paragraph from your textbook. And I think for that reason, you're much more likely to remember it. My fourth tip would be, if you're making a timetable but you're not being specific about it, you're actually just wasting your time. Throughout sixth form, you'll probably be encouraged to make weekly plans and then a to-do list for the day, and that's a great idea. I love scheduling my days. It's the way that I find helps me to best optimize my time. But if at the beginning of the day you've written, oh, maths revision 4 till 6, you're actually doing absolutely nothing, because what's going to happen, you're going to come home from school, you're going to be knackered and tired, and you're going to think, oh, what do I want to revise? And you're going to pick something easy. That's not very beneficial to you in the long run. So what you should do is at the beginning of the day, be specific about what you're going to do exactly. You know, integration by parts homework, revise chapter 8.3. These things are specific, and it means that when it comes to it, you're not going to be tempted to just pick the easiest option for you. My fifth tip is that you should always be revising by going through your syllabus rather than going through your textbook, or more specifically the contents page of your textbook. And there's this really popular colour coding scheme called RAG, it's revision technique, where you sort of go through everything you've learnt so far, look at the lesson titles, you highlight red for don't remember, amber for okay, and then you do green for like, I remember this lesson, it was great, I'm not revising it again. And this scheme works, it's great, it's easy, it's quick. But the issue is that people often turn to the contents page of their textbook to do so, and this is a problem because, firstly, lesson titles don't fully reflect everything that's covered in that lesson, and secondly, because you might see a lesson title, think, oh yeah, this theorem, I remember it was great, it was easy, you've forgotten about a special case, an exception, when it can't be used, you know, and then naturally what's going to come up in the exam is that the exception case of that theorem is going to come up and you're going to be very, very confused. Now, the syllabus is organised differently from this in that the theorem and then the exception will be written separately. And so even though the syllabus is a little bit longer, it's going to help you make up those differential marks that other people aren't getting because they've forgotten about these little discrepancies. And you're the one that's catching them up. It's quick revision, one case where it can't apply. You might be getting, you know, some cases 8 marks from it if no one else can do it. My sixth tip is that if you're lucky enough to take a subject that features coursework as part of your final grade, you're definitely pretty early on, to be honest, going to get to a point where you feel like coursework is a waste of time, it takes too many hours, it's too much stress, it's not worth it. People tend to get into this mindset that they're going to fail their coursework, you know, completely waste of time, not going to do that, and they're going to make up the marks in the final exam. And that is a terrible idea. The way that you should be seeing it is that coursework is basically free marks. You know, in computer science, coursework is only worth 20% of the grade, which seems pretty insignificant, but looking at last year's grade boundaries, the difference between an A-star grade and a C was 78. Okay, if I hadn't done my coursework, I would have dropped 3 grades. And so you really, really need to put that time into coursework. Just remind yourself that a lot of other people can't be bothered. You need to be the person that can. My seventh tip is math specific, and that is that you need to learn how to use your calculator well. You know, set aside 3 or 4 hours of time on YouTube looking at all the things your calculator can do, because the chances are it's going to be able to do the majority of your exam for you. And obviously this isn't useful in the actual exam, you do actually need to answer the questions yourself, but you can plug it in your calculator in 10 seconds, it'll tell you the answer, and you can use that to check how well you've done, to check the questions that you've got wrong. You know, also give yourself a little bit of peace of mind that you know you got so-and-so many marks. You know, you need to be able to use your calculator, because there's no bigger waste of time in an exam than someone who's faffing around with the menus when you could easily fix that problem in 10 minutes if you just watched one YouTube video the week before. My eighth tip is to, for each subject, make a list of all the topics in priority order, where you put the things that are most likely to come up at the top and the things that don't really come up at the bottom. For example, in maths, differentiation and integration, absolutely huge topics. Things like index laws don't come up very often. And this is important because right before an exam, or if you're a bit behind with your revision, you can pull out the list and go straight for the things at the top, because these are going to be the things that are most likely to come up, and so you're sort of securing yourself the most marks per minute of revision time. My ninth tip is that if you're looking at an idea and you just can't wrap your head around it, 2 questions that I like to ask myself to try and shift into a new perspective is why and how. I think the easiest way to remember something is if you know why it works. So ask yourself, where does this come from? Why is it true? Try and draw on other things that you know. And this sort of might take a bit of time, but once you understand why, it's very, very likely that you'll actually understand the new concept that you're learning itself. The other thing you can ask yourself, if maybe the why is a bit iffy, is how. How can this be applied? How does this work? Where does it go? And this means that even if you don't have a full understanding, by looking at some other exam scenarios, if it does come up in your exam, you at least have a punt at using the idea, and maybe you'll be able to snag yourself a couple of extra marks. My 10th tip / final piece of advice is that A-levels are meant to be hard, because they're the only way of academically differentiating between the absolute best of the best. And even though this difficulty can be discouraging, it does mean that you cannot get through an A-level without working hard. And so even though you might not be getting the results you want at certain times, or you may feel very tired or feel like you're going to fail, if you continue to be consistent, there is a very strong likelihood that you will be the person that comes out with a top grade. You know, some people need to get A stars, why shouldn't it be you? And so I'd say the most important A-level tip is to keep going, is to stick at it. You know, 2 years seems like a very, very long time, but if you push through as much as you can, you will be rewarded in the end.